What is up? I am the Cartographer, and this is where we crush career confusion. Now, I know what you're thinking. What is career fog? Well, in a short summary, it's when you're so confused about the future, you freeze up in terms of applying to jobs and your whole career planning effort. The reason is you can't look for a job because you're so afraid about what's around the corner. Now, I realized this was an issue when I was in high school and college, and I had a ton of issues trying to figure out, how do I figure out what's next? What am I supposed to do with my life? And over the last several decades, I've seen many folks I work with suffer the exact same issue. And it got me thinking, well, how do we solve this? Well, I'm going to do just that. We're going to talk about what career fog is, where it comes from, and 3 tips on how to beat it. And if you stick around till the end, I also have a free gift for you as well. Let's get into it. All right, what's career fog? Well, the best way to explain what it is really through an example. You may know people who've gone to med school or have become doctors. The good news about becoming a doctor is when you start out, you know exactly what your path is going to be. You know the milestones. You know that you have to go take your pre-med classes in undergrad. You got to graduate, hopefully. You got to apply to med school. And to do that, you have to take your MCATs. Once you're in med school, then you have to apply to residency. Once you match, you then go to residency, and then eventually you decide if you want to do a fellowship. And so there's some variations there, but by and large, those are the steps: undergrad, med school, residency, and fellowship. And then at that point, you're a doctor, right? Pretty straightforward. Now, the other situation is where most of us are in. We don't want to be a doctor, and we don't really know what we want to do, which is an issue. But say we even did know what we wanted to do. Let's say we want to become a CEO. We really want to aim high. Well, what's your plan going to be? How do you get there? If you ask 10 people, they're going to give you 20 different answers on how to become a CEO. And then you get confused because it's what you want to do, but then there's no clear answer on what the next step is, let alone 10 years worth of steps or 20 years to become a CEO. And that is career fog. Now, we've covered what career fog is. The question you also would have is, why is it the biggest hurdle for someone who's just graduated, whether from high school or college? The reason is, if you are plagued by career fog, you don't have a direction. You don't know what your next step is going to be. You don't know what your second step is going to be. Now, everything is made up on the fly. And why that's terrible is, as someone who starts a career, your career is going to be years long. You want to have a good idea of what your end destination is going to be and how to get there. If you don't have that, you're just making things up as you go, and you're not going to optimize for what you really want in life. And that may mean you're not going to earn as much. You're not going to have the quality of life you want. You're not going to necessarily be able to get all the things you want or support a family. There's so many different consequences that come with having career fog. So the next question that's logical is going to be, what causes it? Well, what it really is, it's really a symptom of not understanding how the business world works. And what I mean by that is, pretty much every job you're ever going to want is either working for a company or for a large institution, whether it's the government or a nonprofit. And careers and career progression kind of works a certain way in all these organizations. Now, if you don't know how people move up, that entire process is going to be a giant mystery to you. And that is the career fog. That is the cause of it. It is the ignorance of how things and how people move up through organizations. Now, you can't blame anyone for that. That's just the way things are, right? If you go talk to your parents, they are only going to usually know about their area or their domain of expertise. So they will tell you what they know. You may have friends, family friends that have other kind of expertise. They may tell you what they know, but each person is really going down or going up one little thread as they move up in an organization. The truth of the matter is, most of us only have exposure to maybe 5% of the total different things we could be doing. So everything else outside of a couple few things you're exposed to as you grow up is just a mystery. That, once again, is career fog. And so now you know what it is. Now you know where it comes from. The real question now is, how do you beat this? The first thing I want to mention is you need a mental filing system. So what do I mean by that? We just talked about how like 95% of what's going on in the business world is sort of a mystery, right? Essentially, there's so many different industries, so many different positions. There's so many things going on that as you talk to people who are in different industries, it's easy to forget. It's easy to not realize how everything fits together. So let me give you an example of what I mean by a mental filing system. So for example, listen to these couple of sentences and take a minute and think about what I'm talking about. So Mike wants Fred to do everything for him, absolutely everything. And Sarah agrees. Okay. So basically that's two to three sentences. What would you come away with? What sort of impression do you have from all of this? Well, if you don't know anything else, it might seem like Mike is kind of selfish, right? Mike wants Fred to do everything for him, and then Sarah agrees. And so Sarah seems to be backing Mike up for some reason. So that's just raw data. That's just a couple statements I made. But what if I told you that Fred is actually Mike's dad and Sarah is Mike's mom? Well, in that situation, it completely changes the dynamic. Mike is basically a kid that wants his parents or his father to do everything for him, which is reasonable because he's probably a child or a baby. So what you realize is that framework or that filing system to understand the relationships between Fred, Mike, and Sarah, that changes the entire story. So in the same way, when someone comes and tells you, hey, I'm a process engineer at an oil and gas refinery, and then someone else tells you, oh, I am a supply chain person at an oil and gas refinery, you don't connect the dots because you don't really know what goes on in one of these refineries, for example. But if you have an understanding of the different business functions like finance, supply chain, and what these different functions do, and if you have a general understanding of different industries out there, suddenly things start to make sense. And the important thing is, as you move through life, you're going to encounter all kinds of different people. You're not necessarily going to have a perfect plan on how to move up in your career, but as you meet people, if you had that general knowledge of that filing system, you know what to pay attention for and what specific facts or insights you can retain. And what ends up happening is if you don't have that filing system, you're going to meet a lot of different people and you're going to completely forget the important things they tell you about what they do and potentially what sort of careers you may want to pursue. So that's number one, get a mental filing system. Number two is introspection. Now, introspection is basically a way to know yourself better. And it's probably a cliche at this point, but most people really don't know themselves very well. What you're good at, what you're not so good at, what inspires you, what life events really created different desires and those sorts of things, and what motivates you and demotivates you. Figuring out what you are like actually helps you also figure out what's good for you as well. And so when you're trying to cut through this fog, first you have a mental filing system, so now you can pick up interesting tidbits and you know where to file them in your head. Introspection allows you to pick and choose which areas of business or government or nonprofits really resonate with who you are as a person. And once again, if you don't have that introspection, if you haven't done that or those exercises, you'll see a lot of data, but it'll just be a giant blur. It'll be a giant cloud of fog, essentially. So that's the second tip, introspection. Next, and it's really the next three things, they kind of go together. There's trying things out, there's talking to people, and doing your own research. And so the first two things are really ways of filing away important facts and filing away important emotions as you talk to people. The last three things are really your way of experimenting and doing research, right? And so trying things is one of the best ways to do that. Go and volunteer at a soup kitchen if you're interested potentially in working in a nonprofit. Go and volunteer for Habitat for Humanity if you're interested in construction, right? There are ways that you can potentially do nonprofit work, even work at your school or different areas where you can try out little bits and pieces of jobs you might be interested in. And once again, in terms of trying things, the best way to try something is to actually do the job, right? You can get an internship or actually go get a job. Next, number 4, it's talking to people. So I mentioned this where as you talk to people, you see your parents, family, friends, relatives, friends, mentors, all these different people are great sources of information to start collecting this data about what will fit your personality and what you're interested in. So that's super important. And then 5, do your own research. There's plenty of information online. You can get read up on a lot of these different subjects, these functions, and these industries pretty quickly just to get an idea of what's going on. YouTube videos are also a great resource as well. They show you a day in the life. They show you all sorts of things about different industries. So if you do these 5 things, what's going to end up happening is you will have a much better ability to see through the fog. So for a lot of people, once again, if you want to be a doctor, that's a pretty set in stone path, right? If you want to do pretty much anything else, you have to figure it out. You have to experiment. You have to try things out. So as we wrap up, the important thing is make time to implement a couple of these tips and let me know what your results are down in the comments. If career planning seems daunting to you, don't worry, you're not alone. Many individuals we've worked with have run into similar concerns and questions. They mainly ask themselves, how do I figure out what I'm good at? How do I figure out what I want? And how do I get from here to there? And how do I explain my rationale to myself and others? That's why we put together our Career Path Mapper course. It's designed to answer those questions and give you career clarity instead of stress. We built this after working with tons of people for years on an ad hoc basis, helping them map their progression through different industries, all the way to becoming senior leaders. After you take this course, you'll know the career destination that makes sense for you, and you'll create a plan on how to get there. Now, there are lots of other goodies we've included, but make sure you go to this page to learn more and sign up.